Yeah, I do. Yep. Do you need one? Usually what I do is look at the file and see if they need a water test before I issue the CO. And we can always give them a temporary one. Okay, because sometimes they need it for,
You say to occupy for 30 days, but then after that, you're not to.
okay, usually, excuse me, usually what I do is, like if they're just waiting for the water test results, that's when I would do it, but if you don't want to, that's fine.
If we're waiting, if they need anything, we can give them a copy of this. If they need the bank and it says final inspection.
Okay, all right. Tonight?
Yeah, starting at 4.
Oh, so it stayed here.
Yes.
Sorry, that's stupid. Didn't you used to start later?
Great to see so many people on.
We're just going to give it a few more minutes. It looks by my clock, it's about 3:59 and folks are still joining. So I'm just going to hold off on getting underway for another minute or two, and then we'll get promptly started.
Z, they all found out that you were going to be here, so that's why they came.
Yeah, that's it, Kurt. That's what it was, I'm sure. I don't think so. I think it's just great to see a crowd that's so big to have interest in septic systems and that problem. But it's great to see this kind of group get together. Thank you.
Welcome to Wellfleet.
What could be more exciting than alternative septic systems on a beautiful fall Cape Cod evening?
Well, it's getting dark.
It is.
All right, it's 4:02 and I think we should get started because we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So I first want to thank everyone for joining us. We think this is an exciting topic, and that's why we tried to extend the invite far and wide to get as many people here as possible. As most of you probably know, Wellfleet is well underway to obtaining a watershed permit. We're in the process with our consultant, Scott Horsley, and GHD. So we've been working really hard, and we acknowledge that a piece of our program is going to involve the installation of these enhanced IA systems to get our nitrogen reduced to where it needs to be. So we see a lot of projects coming in and not a lot of use of these systems. So we wanted to have this workshop to expand upon what these systems do, how they work, and what's available, what the data looks like coming out of them, and mainly have an opportunity for a Q&A. We have engineers, sanitarians here. We have some consultants that are going to provide information to us. And then we also have members of the public. So we have quite a varied group of people. So I'm most excited to hear some Q&A after we hear from our presenters. And with that, I'm going to see if Kurt or Scott has anything that they want to add before we turn it over.
Just quickly, the town obviously approved at town meeting this program and funded it to the tune of about $250,000. So we do have funding available. That's part of the program, and we'll certainly be discussing that as well, how the public can access that and how the program details will work. So just one other thing.
Hillary, I'll just mention quickly, again, echo everybody's thanks for attending. We think that these technologies that are going to be discussed tonight are unique in that they are performing much better than, let's say, the older generation of INAs. They're much more passive, easy to operate, and we think they are, as Hillary said, likely to be part of the watershed solution for Wellfleet. So I won't take any more time than that, Hillary, so I'll turn it back to you to introduce our first speaker.
Sure. Before I go ahead and introduce him, I just want to make sure everyone has been on Zoom, knows where to find the raise hand feature. It's along the bottom under reactions. If you click on that, you'll see an option to raise hands. So it's a little difficult to keep an online meeting of 50 people in line. So if we can try to raise our hands if we want to speak, that will just assist me in calling on you so that you can have an opportunity to speak. In the meantime, I'm going to ask that everyone go ahead and mute themselves so we don't have a lot of background sound because there's a lot of us on here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pio Lombardo of Lombardo and Associates, and he's going to be speaking to us this afternoon about the Nitrex system. Pio, take it away.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you all for participating. I see we got a healthy number of 54 participants, so that's one of the advantages of Zoom. So I will then just do the share screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. You should be able to. Let me know if you can't.
All right, so can you see the what I've got there on the screen on our Nitrex presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just check and make sure we got, all right. Okay, so the Nitrex technology has been around for over 20 years now. So it's a old generation and new generation technique. Mass DEP has approved the technology to achieve total nitrogen under 10 milligrams per liter, which in certain situations eliminate the Title V flow restrictions in nitrogen sensitive areas. DEP just approved a project in Sudbury that's about 9,600 gallons a day under that piling permit opportunity. The Nitrex technology is permitted to achieve total nitrogen under 10 milligrams per liter in many states, Florida, Oregon, many states throughout the U.S. We have installations throughout the U.S. The U.S. EPA and MassTech has recognized that the Nitrex system can achieve total nitrogen effluent of 2.4 milligrams per liter. In our opinion, it's a cost-effective, least life cycle cost, especially per kilogram of nitrogen removed. The applications for the Nitrex system include single-family applications, cluster and neighborhood type system situations, commercial, and as well as large flow applications. As I mentioned, we have over 22 years of proven performance that has been field validated at MassTech, US EPA, states of Oregon, in Montana and Florida, where a number of actual installations were implemented by those state agencies and independently evaluated. Brian Baumgartner of the MassTech made a presentation not that long ago on an EPA-sponsored event. So I just clipped what was summarized from his presentation that identified he provided his list of the 5 best available IA technologies, and Nitrex is right there along with a few others that are with the effluent quality as Brian indicated. EPA evaluated this back in 2010 and issued this report, which was a guidance for federal lands in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And as you can see, provided documentation that effluent TN for the Nitrex system was 2.2. Now, what is the Nitrex system? How does it operate? This slide just shows a simplified process flow diagram. We basically have a septic tank, effluent from the septic tank, then goes through the Nitrex recirculating media filter, and then after that, it goes through the Nitrex denite filter, and from there it goes into the drain field. It's a passive technology. There's no aeration required. The only requirement, and it's really site specific, is there's a need for some pumps. We're now talking about 1/3 horsepower pumps. The treatment system cannot be shut off by property owners. I know that's a concern with certain technologies. And the technology can be completely gravity when sites have sufficient slope. In fact, the original applications back in 2001 out in Oregon were indeed just pure gravity. So they went from basically a single pass sand filter, then through the Nitrex filter to discharge. There was no pumps there needed. And actually, one needs topo for that. There's no sludge that's produced. The electricity is mainly used or only used for the periodic pump use. Pump operates perhaps, I forget the exact numbers, but it's less than 25% of the time, and it's very low wattage. As a professional engineer, I guarantee the performance to achieve total nitrogen under 10. The history shows that we averaged 3 milligrams per liter. I think we're unique in that regard, that we guarantee performance. And the performance has been comparable and even better than sophisticated wastewater treatment systems, where the limits of technology are sort of acknowledged to be an effluent total nitrogen of 3 milligrams per liter. In terms of operation maintenance costs, the this is referring to just single family applications, once a year is sufficient, and typically is done with sampling. The operational cost, the cost issues here in terms of equipment costs, there's a number of variables. Basically, how many pumps may be needed, which is site specific. So I gave that range there of 18 to 22,000 for all of the equipment costs. And depending on, frankly, there are economies of scale in which those costs can come down. In terms of annual O&M costs, electricity is about $50 a year. And then the O&M really is dictated by the sampling requirements. DEP's requirement is that there's 4 samples taken per year for the first 3 years of operation, and based upon lab costs, et cetera, that comes out to $13.20 per year. And in year 4 and beyond that, sampling requirements are twice a year. So you can see that each sampling event is essentially $330 for both the lab cost and the labor cost associated with collecting the samples. And naturally, when the operator's there to collect the samples, they would do the minor maintenance that's needed on the system. The major maintenance item is, frankly, anything that has to do with the pumps, which is really just the floats. And then the spray nozzles periodically need to be cleaned. That's it. And now, in terms of nitrogen removal, I'll just say parenthetically, because I understand that this is of interest in certain watersheds, that the phosphorus removal features can be added to the system if that's desired at all. Now, I also have been focusing on the single family because that's my understanding of the focus in Wellfleet. However, the Nitrex, again, has been used for larger scale systems throughout the Commonwealth and many other applications. We use a SCADA system where the system is managed by a PLC, programmable logic controller, which has an internet connection which communicates to the engineer and the operator on for the system. Daily reports are electronically issued on system wastewater flows and process unit status. These are predominantly mechanical systems. We know that there's an effort underway for this device, the nitrogen monitoring device, and should that get proven to be usable, it would make obviously a huge positive impact on operational costs. Any alarm conditions are instantaneously sent to the facility operator and the engineer with an identification of the alarm cause. And we have a response system that allows us to know what to do Generally, the response time, the system has enough buffering capacity that the response time just needs to be within a day or two. Now, this is an example of the PLC at a cluster system. This is at Granby, Massachusetts wastewater treatment plant. This one is a groundwater discharge locations. Code flow is 17,000 gallons per day. And you'll see all of the various pumps in the systems are monitored in terms of their runtime and flows, et cetera, so we can watch what's going on. At another facility, we also have real-time monitoring of nitrate and ammonia levels throughout the system. Now, just to provide some illustrations of, situations where the technology has been used, these photographs illustrate a number of installations. The one here in the upper left-hand corner is in Maryland, and you can see the Nitrex filter is here. And for the recirculating media filter, many of you will recognize the Advantex was used in that situation. We also have used the Advantex in this sort of configuration, where the footprint on this is the smallest footprint possible, where the RMF sits right on top of the septic tank. We did this installation in Virginia many years ago. And then in Harvard, Massachusetts, we have a system there where we're using even drip irrigation for the effluent. And you can see once the system is installed, the only thing that is visible are the manhole covers. And you can't tell, but on the wall there of the house are all the control panels for the pumps. Okay. We also had installations down in Rhode Island. There were a number of, we made a number of donations to the URI people and we installed the system, as you can see, in the year 2003. The table here shows the data that was collected by URI at these two different locations, and you can see the nitrate levels are pretty low. Okay. And then the Nitrex system was evaluated at MassTech. It started back in 2001, and George Heufelder issued this report back in 2008 that just documented it all. Here's the process flow diagram. In that location, we used a recirculating sand filter. And just taking a quote from George's report, the Nitrex filter system there achieved a mean of 5.4 and a medium of 4.2. Obviously, this was 20 years ago, and we've made some improvements since that time, and not the least of which is, frankly, insulation that allows the system to stay warmer, which enables higher nitrogen removal. In terms of larger scale systems, we've done a number of cluster developments in Massachusetts, in other locations. In Mashpee, it's underneath the parking area. And that's one of the nice features of our system, is that when for certain situations, we're not consuming land. So the land can be used for other purposes. We also have a similar situation in Eastham, where it's about an 8,000 gallons a day system. And then in Malibu, California, it's underneath the shopping center parking lot. So you can see the manhole covers there. And that one was a design flow of 45,000 gallons a day. And then recently, we've completed construction, and it's been operational now, of a system in Southampton, New York, where 11,000 gallons a day, serving 37 houses. And this is the treatment plant. Again, everything's below grade. And that's just the operations building. The county there has strict requirements on the operations building. Not much is really needed. from the building. And then this is an illustration of our facility in Granby, which is, I guess, 18,000 gallons a day. It's serving a condominium. And the effluent at that location has consistently been under 2 milligrams per liter. And that's with sampling every month, and sampling with lab analysis done every month. So with that, I know we wanted to stay on a fast track. That concludes our presentation. Naturally, I'm happy to respond to any questions. Gary Rubenstein's our senior engineer that gets involved in a lot of the, let me call it the real engineering in actual installation on these projects. So with that, Hillary, I'll turn it back to you and
Thank you, Pio.
respond to questions now or later as you direct.
I think what I'd like to do is see if we have a couple questions for you before we move on, because I don't want to see the technologies get jumbled up in folks' head. So
Yes.
I have a question. I'm going to lead off with a couple questions that I have and some that have come in.
Right.
Seasonality. Can you tell us how your system functions? We have a lot of seasonal homes here in town.
Right.
What does that do to the sampling protocol? What do the numbers look like on seasonal occupancy?
Yeah, no, good question. We frankly addressed that at MassTech back in the year 2001, where we operated the system, and this was all done under George's and MassTech's control, but the system was basically shut off for the week and operated on a weekend only for, I forget, a number of months. There's no change in treatment performance. So the reason and the beauty of the technique that we use is that it's a fixed film technology versus an activated sludge technology, and fixed film technology is much more resilient towards varying flows and strength. And that's the reason why we have always relied upon fixed film technology. So again, it's not an issue, and we have documentation and data that shows that it's not an issue, and that data is all from MassTech.
Great. You have a guarantee for your system that if the nitrogen is not coming in below 10 milligrams per liter, you will remedy the situation. What does that look like for a homeowner?
Well, we put this in writing, and it's in all the documentation that's on the DEP website, is that basically, if it's not meeting the performance guarantee, we do what we call a diagnostic report to assess the situation to determine what's the cause. If the cause is our responsibility, we'll fix it, as we have done. If the cause is not our responsibility, i.e. the property owner is abusing the system with toxic materials, as an example, then they got to change their habits. So we go through a very objective process to determine what the cause is, and then whatever the cause is, it should be very clear whose responsibility it is.
Right.
At the end of the day, we're very concerned about this because those of you who know us know that we strive for excellence all the time, and we respond to any issues of concern.
Great, thank you, Pio. Is it possible to retrofit this system into an existing Title V?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the facilities that were installed in Maryland were retrofits.
Okay.
So,
perfect.
and the simplicity is, when you look at the process flow diagram, it sits in between the septic tank and the drain field.
Okay, great.
So it's an easy retrofit.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm just gonna, I think that's Brian Dudley. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. I'm gonna view in the chat and see what other questions came in. Brian, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Pio, for the presentation. You say that this is passive and doesn't require aeration. So I'm curious, have you modified the design? Because if there's no aeration, how are you nitrifying? And because the two systems on the Cape that you referenced, both Mashpee and Eastham, to my recollection, do have aeration units prior to the Nitrex filter.
Yeah, no, the quote, the way we provide, or the way oxygen is provided to the system to achieve the nitrification, and you know, that's obviously an excellent point, is frankly just by recirculation. The analogy I would make is basically it's a recirculating trickling filter. So the aeration just occurs, it's like a cooling tower, if you will. Aeration comes from pumping the water on top and letting it spray down on top of the media. And when you do that, air gets incorporated into the water. So that's how oxygen is injected into the water. So it's a very, let me call it, passive technique versus bubbling air into the water. So the oxygen comes from that recirculating media. Now, on the units, and it depends on the size, some units don't have it, there is a fan that moves the air around. But
right.
that's it. It's not bubbling air into it, and it's, you know, it's a peanut fan.
Yeah, but the fact, but even if you're using an RSF type of media filter, the fact that you're pumping to recirculate does not make it an entirely passive system.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
it's not
you.
entirely passive. It can be if you have the what do you call it? If you have the slope on a property, but it's not, you're correct, it's not entirely passive. It's it has a small pump.
Okay, moving along. Another question on seasonality. What if the system is not used for, say, half the year, and then you turn it on for half the year? How does it function in those situations?
Well, we have no problems. It has no problems at all. Okay, it works just fine. And the reality is, when we start the systems up from scratch, we get treatment performance within, I want to say, within a day.
Okay, excellent. What happens when the power goes out for several days, like we've recently experienced here?
Well, that's one of the issues that you know, needs to be addressed. There's a few ways that we deal with that. In certain cases, you know, there is let me call it emergency storage provided in the septic tank, and you know, the code standard is 24 hours. Where there's pumps, there's an outlet provided so that an emergency generator could be connected to it. You know, portable emergency generator could be connected to it to discharge any water that's been accumulating in the system.
Okay, but that's a problem that we're going to face across the board in any type of technology or pump system that we have. So good to always keep that in mind. Pio, with that, I'm just going to scan the crowd here. Does anyone else have a question? We will have additional opportunities to ask questions of Pio as we get through the other two presentations. But if anyone has a pressing
Hillary, I
question.
see a question from Tim Gleason.
Okay, let me see. Tim, if you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sure. Hey, thanks for the presentation, Pio.
Yes.
I was curious, your presentation made reference to the equipment costs. Do you also have estimates of the installation costs for household scale systems?
Right, right. I'm glad you asked that, Tim. What we have provided to those who ask is basically the entire system cost, in our experience, is between $25,000 and $30,000. Excuse me, $25,000 and $30,000, which includes all costs, so you know, installation and soft costs and equipment costs. We typically provide those numbers, given that there's a number of installers on this call. I thought they would mainly just be interested in the equipment cost. So again, the number that we advertise is that an installed system is going to be between 25 and 30, And naturally, there's variances depending on landscape issues and the properties, et cetera.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. One last, if I may, just
Yes.
when we did the systems many years ago in Maryland, frankly, they were installed for under $20,000.
Great. Thank you. Lots of good food for thought here. Next up, we are going to hear from Zenas Crocker. He's a member of the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. And down in Barnstable, they have been installing the nitro system around Schubel's Pond. So Zini, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me see if I can share my screen with everybody. And let me pick out this. And can everybody see that screen right now?
Yes.
Great. All right, I'm going to go to this box. And so first of all, thanks for taking the time, everybody, to listen to what we're doing. You know, I'm not an engineer, unlike Pio. And first of all, you know, a shout out to Pio. He's been working on this for decades. He's done terrific work. He's been a thought leader in the area. It's critical. I think one of the critical things, the way we think about this, is there's going to be no one solution that fits all. We know that we're going to need municipal expansion. We know we're going to need alternatives. We know we're going to need other kinds of alternatives. We're working on restoring cranberry bogs and doing other things to deal with our contaminated water. You know, I got into this because I grew up here on Cape Cod. I left, went in the finance business, came back and said, what happened on Cape Cod? I can't swim in the water anymore. It's full of jellyfish. It's disgusting. The ponds are closed. The lakes are in trouble. The drinking water is a mess. What happened? And so I started to do some work, look around, try to understand it. Scott Horsley actually introduced me to a guy named Bob Zimmerman, who founded the Charles River Watershed Association. And he had something called ZimFacts. So remember, I'm not an engineer. I'm going to throw out things as I see it. You can fact check me. You can look at all this and take it with a grain of salt, but I'm excited, very excited about the work we're doing. We're working in a small watershed in the town of Barnstable. It's around 12,500 acres. It was identified by the US EPA and others as being an interesting area. It's the third most contaminated watershed on Cape Cod. Unfortunately, the gold prize goes to Pompanesett. The silver goes to Ocoyet over in Falmouth. This is the third worst. We don't want to win that award, but it's a great area to study the situation, try to understand what we can do, what steps can we take to clean up our water and try to fix our watersheds. Here's the town of Barnstable expansion plan, which we applaud. 3 phases, 30 years. Originally, it was scheduled for 60 years. I stood up and said, that's a bad plan because almost everybody's dead. So let's have a plan that maybe there are some people living. It's a plan that we need to move ahead with, but it's tremendously expensive. And one of the things you can see when you look on this illustration here is the white spaces do not get any treatment ever. And we think that's a missed opportunity, especially when we think we need to focus not just on the estuaries, also on our lakes and ponds and our drinking water. That's critical. We have a lot of partners here. They're all really important. A lot of them are on the line with us right now. And we have a lot of work to do and we're trying to learn. But what are we doing? So we identified Schubel Pond, a classic kettle hole pond in the town of Barnstable, as a perfect area to do work. You can see what we've done already with our partners at the US EPA and the US Geological Survey. We put in 34 wells, a number of multi-level sample wells. We have over 70 different locations where we can look at the water quality. We decided early on we needed to test just a few systems. We'll pick the best in class, the lowest cost. We'll talk about the criteria we picked to try to understand what's going on and what happens when you replace Title V systems in cesspools. What happens to the groundwater? How are these systems going to work in a real world environment? And while a lot of the illustrations that Pio mentioned, they're critical, greenfield, new systems, big systems, commercial systems, our focus has been on how do we replace the 160,000+ existing systems on Cape Cod? How do we do that in a fashion that will make sense? Some will argue we don't need to replace all the systems. I would argue that's not correct. We need to replace cesspools, shouldn't exist at all. Title V systems don't work. We're actually putting in by my numbers, probably 3,000 to 5,000 new Title V systems every year right now going in on Cape Cod. So here you'll see 10,000 square foot lots. So working class neighborhood. We're paying for everything to do the installations here. And we'll talk about the study that we're doing. Here's a Schubel Pond. You can see an algal bloom, cyanobacteria on the northern edge of this pond. In 2020, the pond's been closed for 3 years running because of contamination. Excuse me, the nitro system we're interested in because it's modular. You can drop it in. It's relatively easy. I'm not an expert. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a septic system installer, but I become kind of a little bit knowledgeable about how these work because we decided to roll up our sleeves, pay for everything and understand how they work. And when I mean pay for everything, we are doing the well monitoring that the US EPA is putting in wells. They're doing the monitoring work there. We're going to collect all the water usage, individual water usage, excluding any irrigation at every household. We're looking at influent. We're looking at effluent coming out of the system. We're putting lysimeters underneath some of the leaching fields. We're putting in new advanced technology that the EPA has been working to certify, and that technology allows us for real-time nitrogen monitoring. There are not every component of nitrogen, but it looks like it's getting very, very strong correlation. And all that's to match up with what we're going to do, which is monthly monitoring of these systems, even though this particular system is in fact provisionally improved. So we're still looking at monthly monitoring, even though we're technically only required to do quarterly monitoring. Why do we like this particular system? I met with the guys who developed this system. They used to run waste treatment globally for Alcoa Aluminum. A couple of the guys retired to Martha's Vineyard, same problem. They said, you know what, we think we can design something that's going to work to help solve this problem. So they're using existing septic tank technology and retrofitting it. You know, every Title V that's designed in has a reserve area. And in that reserve area, we're able to put in this case, either a 1,500 gallon or 2,000 gallon tank. That tank is proving, we think, decentralized technology versus centralized technology is very, very critical. It's resilient, so we think there are a number of fail-safe elements here. The maintenance, very, very low. We'll talk about that some more. It's monitored in real time. We think that's critical, so we can see, is the air pump on? It's the only working part. What's the pressure in the air pump itself, in the air lines themselves? What's the temperature in the tank? Cost competitive versus soaring. You can see the costs on the box to the right that we're experiencing so far. So we put so far 6 of these in one neighborhood. We'll have another 2 or 3 going in about a week. I welcome anybody who wants to come down, contact us, come see. You can look and see exactly how the installation's going. And one of the key things is it's fail-safe. So in this neighborhood, just like a lot of Cape Cod, we lost power. Good news was all these systems could continue to operate as Title V systems, essentially. Denitrifying, no doubt somewhat better than a Title V, but not doing the full job of denitrification, but that's okay. Everybody can continue to do their business, if you will, in the absence of power, and we think that's critical in this case. Performance, here we can see the performance so far. The numbers that are interesting here is, is highly variable, the influent numbers. So the brown is showing what's coming into the systems. These are the roughly 20 systems, 18 systems that have been installed at this point in time. There are more now, we're closing in on 30 at different sites, but you can see there's a tremendous variability. Some people think that could be based on diet, could be based on other considerations, water saving devices. In any case, very variable. What's coming out? What's the effluent? And you can see that the averages for the most recent installation, 6.7 milligrams, are really, really very strong numbers. Not as good as PO's 2 or 3, and I think that's the gold standard and everybody's goal. But the developers believe that we're going to be on top of 5, probably 3 to 5, as they continue to optimize this system. So we developed a plan for each particular household. We've done all the engineering costs, and you can see what the various costs are here when you look at the screen. We're going to work hard to see if we can't drive the costs lower. One of the costs that we view as being higher than they should be are engineering costs. And we're not trying to get rid of engineers, by the way. But we think that we're probably going to be looking at maybe 60 to 80% of the systems that you'd approach on Cape Cod would probably be retrofits. So a retrofit means the existing septic tank is still operating and is healthy, or the existing leaching field is still active and healthy, in which case we can insert a new system. In that case, I'd argue that we should be able to bring engineering costs down to a lower level. We have a working plan in place. So we really just need to know, do we have the elevation? Do we have the existing conditions? It shouldn't cost $4,000 to do that kind of engineering work. If we can do that, we're bringing in costs at a very, very attractive level as far as we're concerned. How's it look? So here's a perfect series of snapshots about an installation going in just a couple of weeks ago. And you can see, any one of the installers on the line. This is not complicated. Excuse me, it's not rocket science. You're putting a tank in the ground. You're connecting it to the existing lines. You're doing some work getting ready for the hookup, and you can see Maureen Thomas, who's on the line, who works at Clean 2 on the right-hand side of your screen, standing on top of the limestone and the wood chips, the only components outside of some other material that's in these systems. The only working part is an air pump. We believe the air pump probably has to be replaced every 7 to 10 years at a cost of current cost $600 about. Limestone lasts probably for decades, maybe for 30, 40, 50 or more years. And the wood chips also decades. We're going to see how many decades these components last. But the design here that we like and is elegant in its simplicity allows for the old wood chips to be removed if need be, new wood chips to be put in. It's also an access panel. And these are underground, as you can see from the pictures on the bottom left and right. But just like getting to your septic tank, periodically, you might dig down a couple of feet in your yard, pop the port open, and do what you needed to do for maintenance purposes. Otherwise, the maintenance is really quite de minimis. And here's a schematic of what the plan looks like. And we're out trying to educate the various people involved, and we're working hard to talk to politicians. We've had a number of people out to look at the site. Here we see Julian Sear on the left, who I'm sure everybody knows from your neck of the woods, and others. We've got numbers and contact information there for Jennifer Loffman, who's the key person in helping get these installed and is doing really all this terrific work at the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, along with our friends and partners at Clean 2. And again, as I mentioned, Maureen Thomas is on the line to answer any questions you might have. So I'll stop there. Happy to go back and talk about details, but I want it to be relatively quick.
Thank you so much, Z. I love this project, and I've been so interested in it all along. So I'm glad you were able to come this afternoon and describe it to the folks of Wellfleet. A couple questions that I have for you. Exactly how many systems are you putting in around the pond?
So we're going to put in a total of 15 systems, 15 nitro systems.
Yeah.
After that, we will probably put in a number of other systems, really a single kind of other system. So we're working with an advanced layer cake design.
Yep.
This is with Brian Baumgartel and George Hoyfelder. And the design of that system is simply a septic tank, a leaching field that has sand in it that provides the nitrification. It's really a bathtub. So in this case, the liquid effluent gets pumped into the sand bed, drains out on the bottom, and then drains into a wood chip box, if you will, from the bottom. The effluent then goes up and is treated and denitrified with the wood chips and then goes into a leaching field. The team at MassTech has been working with this technology. We're anxious to prove another technology. We're hopeful that the cost will be low. We need to learn about it. It's in pilot phase. It hasn't been approved for pilot phase yet. We'd be kicking that off, and we're going to provide the application. Brian Dudley, asked us early on in this program at Shubal Pond to do no more than 2 different systems, but we want to make sure we have a second system on tap. And so that's the idea here. And then actually, we'll put the first one in, and it's in the neighborhood where we're working, which I showed, and one of the neighbors' systems failed. So
Great.
Somebody raised their hand inadvertently, and we're going to help put in hopefully this system and help solve their problem, and also help learn about how these systems work.
Are these homes around this pond, are they seasonal? Are some seasonal in nature, or are they mostly year round?
No, there's some seasonal, but they're mostly year round. And we really wanted to target year round homes, and we wanted to target these smaller footprints, working class neighborhood.
Yep.
10,000 square foot lots. These are not wealthy people. And we wanted to figure out, first of all, can you put something in a 10,000 square foot lot and make it work? We've had a great cooperation from the town of Barnstable, from the Board of Health, to really help us make this happen. And it's complicated. And we all know that one of the dirty little secrets on Cape Cod and difficulties is that wastewater has been treated as a closet zoning situation in many cases. And when we approach the various households that we approach, we find that there are different numbers. The building department will have one number of bedrooms. The assessor's department will have a second number of bedrooms, and the Board of Health may have a third number of bedrooms. And so, part of the challenge is going to be figuring out how we're going to deal with that on the Cape. We think there are opportunities when we've asked Scott Horsley to do the math, and even going from a 3-bedroom and adding a bedroom and going to a 4-bedroom system, in this case, the kind of performance we see, you're still reducing the waste by 75% or more. And given that, and the housing situation on Cape Cod, what a great potential incentive. It could be a win-win in our view, because you could pick up assessed value for a town. Should a town, like I know Wellfleet's considered, grant opportunities and so forth. So we're trying to figure out a way so we can afford to do these systems. We can make the changes over time as these older systems time out. And hopefully we can get in front of the failed systems and start to change them before they really fail.
2 more quick questions for you there, Z. These systems, you received grant funding from the EPA, is that correct?
The EPA did not do any grant funding. What they did do is they provided people and resources to put in the wells.
Okay.
To help with the monitoring. They've guided us through many, many parts of what we're doing, but they haven't actually provided a hard or any grant dollars to us specifically for work that we're doing. We actually raised the money privately here, and so our budget is $350,000 currently. By our current estimates, we'll probably spend just under $500,000 for all the work for about 15 systems. That, however, includes, we're also taking care of all the landscaping.
Yeah.
We're really doing all this. We're gold plating it, as I mentioned. We're putting in special sensors. We're putting in special water meters. We're doing all sorts of things that you wouldn't have to do, because we want to understand everything about how these systems work through time and what they do in the groundwater. The scientists, interestingly, we're seeing about 7 to 11 milligrams of nitrogen in the groundwater in this area. We know it's coming from septic systems. We believe that based on the chart you saw earlier, it's probably starting out at between 60 and 80 milligrams of nitrogen. If we do that same math and we're able to deliver a system that can be 5, 6 plus, we may see the groundwater numbers go to 1 or below 1. And we think that's critical, for people to live on a sandbar like we all do.
For sure. And the last question that I have for you is the operation and maintenance. Do you have an RME? Are you farming that out system by system, homeowner by homeowner? What's the oversight from the coalition?
Right, so we're going to work with Mass Tech, with Brian and George to be the RME in this case, to do the sampling, to do all the work that we're going to do to understand exactly what has to happen. You know, one of the things that's going to happen with, it needs to happen with all these systems is the septic tank has to be pumped periodically, and we're going to look at the septic tank every probably 6 months to make sure we know when that's going to happen. I think we know that different people live differently, and some families are going to be using more cooking oil or what have you. We're going to have to pump those systems more than others. Other than that, really the maintenance here is essentially a sinking fund to provide for replacing some of the parts. The air pump I mentioned. Some of the tubing eventually, we think 10 years or so, probably periodically will need to be replaced. Wood chips, we're going to have to probably replace them at some point, that kind of thing. But really, it's not like you have to go and, you know, add something to the system or do anything, or there's really, you know, one of the people inspecting said, well, I can't approve it because I don't see where the control panel goes. And I said, there is no control panel. So don't worry about that part.
Great. Thank you, Z. I'm just going to scan the crowd, see if anyone has any additional questions before we
Sure.
move on.
Great.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm Judy Bernstein. Are the septics, your proposed septics, limited in certain geographic areas?
No,
In
I'm
other
not
words,
sure.
where are you planning?
Pardon, we've got a phone ringing and I'm not sure I understood the
Sorry,
question.
that's me.
Judy, go ahead and repeat your question just so we're all clear, please.
Okay, approximately where are you planning to put these new septics? Roughly what geographic area?
Well, these are all targeted next to a pond. The pond is troubled. The watershed right there, the sub-watershed includes about 350 homes. We'd love over time to have all those homes be part of a project so we could look at something where maybe over time we can really change the pond water. This is at the tail end of the town's 30-year plan to expand sewer. But our hope, Judy, over time is that we can put these systems in all over the place. Everywhere on Cape Cod should be an opportunity for systems like these or this one.
All right, so you're talking about ponds rather than lakes and stuff like that.
No, we're just talking about water.
So
Any
this
water.
particular project, Judy, is focused around Shubal Pond. Z comes to us from the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, and that's their focus with this project. These types of systems, the nitro system, can go in anywhere in any town, and their performance would be similar. This particular project that Z was describing to us happens to be in Barnstable around this particular pond.
The importance.
Barnstable. So we're not talking about Wellfleet, we're talking about Barnstable?
Yep, this is a sample project that we wanted to feature because they're using the nitro technology, which is an enhanced IA, and we'll soon be getting results from Barnstable. And Barnstable and Wellfleet, oddly enough, have similar soil structures. So the sand is the
Okay.
sand.
So around the area of Cannon Hill Road, are you planning anything in that general area?
Well, we're not talking tonight about specifics of the Wellfleet plan. We're talking tonight about these enhanced IA technologies and getting the word out to our installers and our residents that these systems are available for installation. They appear to be reducing nitrogen to levels that would be beneficial to the town. And we want to understand how they work, where they are, and what the numbers are looking like. So we're not actually proposing as a town to put these in at this point in time. If a resident wants to put them in, they can certainly go forth and have one designed. So we're providing information tonight.
Okay, so you're talking about the possibility of a resident perhaps wanting to do it, or?
Absolutely, yes. I think the more residents that want to take this step, the better we could be in the end.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Z, one more question that came in for you. What
Sure.
happens with seasonal use of this system? Do you know yet, or are we still waiting?
We're going to see how they work. The scientists tell us they're going to continue to be active, and they can, essentially be dormant and not used and go back and continue to perform at a very high level. But that's part of why we're doing this study. And to go back to the lady's, question, and Hillary, you commented on it, but the glacial moraine, the soil structures here, very similar all over Cape Cod, very similar in Long Island. We all have the same soil types. So even though I grew up on Cape Cod, and I always said, towns in Cape Cod are like Greek city states, and one town doesn't really care what another town's doing necessarily. But, we're all in this together, and we all are really connected with water. So that's why it's so important. And the study we're doing is focused because the EPA and the US Geological Survey, who are the smartest people on groundwater, soil types, et cetera, they were the ones who chose this location.
Great. Thank you so much, Z. We're going to have to keep moving. This is also interesting, I know. Brian Baumgartel from the Mass Test Center also works for Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. Go ahead. I'm going to unmute you because you appear to be muted.
There we go. Sorry. Hit the wrong key combination. I tried to be fancy and use a shortcut key and accidentally shut my own video off instead. Okay, so I'm going to do a little screen share here as well, because that is the theme of the evening. Hope everybody can see that okay.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, so I'm here to talk to you about a mouthful, non-proprietary denitrifying on-site wastewater treatment systems. So again, my name is Brian Baumgartel. I'm a senior environmental specialist with Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. I'm also the director of the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. I'm the second director of this facility ever. I follow behind one of the greats of the industry, and George Hoyfelder, who, by the way, is in retirement. However, it still puts in a good 40 to 50 hour week every week, even though he's in retirement. So I'm just going to kind of jump right into it. A lot of folks have probably seen at least some presentation about the layer cake systems at some point from George. So I'm going to kind of just jump into the three types of systems I'm going to talk about. We have three different designs. And they're all mouthfuls because we don't have fun marketing terms for all these, but I do have some short names there. So denitrifying layered media soil absorption systems, AKA the simple layer cake design. Number two is the denitrifying layered media filter system, AKA saturated layer cake. And number three is the single pass slow rate sand filter followed by a tank of wood chips. That's the best I could come up with. Internally, we call that system the New York 2 design, but I'll go by the moniker tank design for this evening. So just to jump right into it, looking at the simple layer cake system or the denitrifying layered media soil absorption system. So this is the basic design. You have a septic tank. The effluent from that septic tank flows into a pump chamber. That pump chamber is utilized to pressurize the shallow pressure distribution system that sits on top. That's that orange rectangle right here. Wastewater from that distribution system trickles down through a nitrification layer, which is an 18-inch layer of Title V sand. And then that's where you're doing all the nitrification. So you're turning the ammonia into nitrate. And this is typically the step where we're stopping with a standard Title V system. The sands that we have are really good at nitrifying wastewater. So turning that ammonia from all of our waste into nitrate, and it doesn't really do a very good job of doing denitrification. So that nitrate is what gets into the groundwater and eventually makes it out to our embayments and causes all the problems that we see in terms of our eelgrass beds dying off and shellfish problems and algae blooms and the like. So the concept here is to intercept that plume of nitrate with a denitrification layer. So what are we using for that layer? It's probably a theme that you've noticed this evening. There are wood chips involved in this particular layer. It's an 18-inch layer of 50-50 mix of wood chips and sand. So the wood chips provide a carbon source for the bacteria to be able to break down that nitrate into nitrogen gas. So that's the basic kind of design. Out of the bottom of this particular system, that denitrification layer, the wastewater, treated wastewater, would flow down into the ground just like it would with a standard system. So this is a single pass filter kind of a design. So we put one of these in at the test center. You know, George was seeing some pretty good results with this system and wanted to do a full scale system. So we put one in conjunction with Stony Brook University. They're a group down on Long Island that runs the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. They had a lot of interest in what we were doing up here and hatched a few ideas about what types of systems they could potentially research. So we have a joint project with them, and we put one of these in here at the test center and saw pretty good results out of it, at least in the initial phases of this installation. So we were seeing, you know, numbers, you know, 10 or so during the winter months, which where you're seeing that peak. I don't know if everybody can see my cursor as I'm doing this, but do you see that, or is that invisible? Okay. So this is during the winter months, and then summer months, we'd see better performance. So then this sort of mess that you see as the years go on, the Stony Brook folks were really interested in taking what they were seeing as a pretty positive result from this system and experimenting with different loading rates. Because obviously there's an interest in maintaining the smallest footprint possible when you have small lots and you have all these setbacks that the boards of health like to enforce on everyone. You have to try to maintain as small a footprint as possible to fit these in. So they were interested in if we load the system at a higher rate than it was designed for, is it able to accept that load, and does the performance suffer? And clearly the answer to that question is yes, performance suffers pretty significantly. Toward the tail end of this particular experiment, they had actually doubled the loading. So the system was designed to receive about 220 gallons per day, and they had doubled the loading to 440 gallons per day. We started to see breakout with this, and we also saw, and breakout is in terms of wastewater kind of bubbling up to the surface. It's exactly what you imagine it would be. We also saw the performance of the system suffer pretty dramatically in terms of the denitrification piece of things. So, you know, we had seen some of these initial results. The system looked pretty good. So we applied for and received a grant from EPA under their SNEP program to install a number of these out in the field, because we wanted to see, well, you know, we're getting pretty good data out of this, but we want to make sure that before we, you know, really advance this idea, that we're doing our due diligence and putting in field installations. So that's what that project was designed to do. And we put in about 12 of these. There were some variations in flow. You know, we had an expectation that we'd be getting folks who were living there year round, but it turns out a lot of them were seasonal, which gives us some trouble in terms of trying to monitor them. But what we really found with them is some pretty unanticipated results, and the performance that we were seeing from these systems just really wasn't there. So we're totally open with the data. This is a non-proprietary system, so I'm not going to hide anything. Basically, what we found is that the simple layer cake design, the performance long-term really isn't there when we start to put these into field installations. So for reference, on this graph, the septic tank effluent is here, this blue line. So you're looking at septic tank effluents like in the range of 100 plus, sometimes up to 150 milligrams per liter, which is, I will say, much higher than what is typically assumed septic tank effluents are. Let's see, the red line here is the performance of the wood chip system, the simple layer cake system that was installed at this location. So very variable performance we found with this, performed pretty well in the beginning and then came up and really had some struggles through this portion here. And then we also had a control. So as part of this experiment, we installed a standard Title V system along the side of it. They were both pressure dosed, so they're not entirely standard, I suppose. But the interesting thing that we found is that the control with no wood chips performed almost as good as the one with the wood chips. And we found that across a couple of the installations. And we found that there's not a whole lot of stability. We're seeing numbers that are pretty high, you know, fairly low actual removals. So we've kind of decided at this point, we're going to not necessarily totally abandon the design paradigm, but we're going to move on to a couple of the different designs and trying to get field installations for those. And Z Crocker, he talked about the installation that we're working on doing at the Shubal Pond project. And as a matter of fact, the Stony Brook folks were here today doing basically an autopsy on this particular system, the one that they have here, to try to better understand what went wrong there. So they're looking at percolation rates in the upper layers where things might have gotten clogged. They're going to be digging down to the wood chip layer tomorrow to do an analysis of what the wood chips look like after 4 years of operation. So there's still things we can learn from this technology, but I think it's time to move on from it and try to identify some better technologies from the group of 3 that we've been looking at. So the simple layer cake, the biggest advantages: simplest design, lowest cost. It has an integrated final dispersal mechanism because it flows out of the bottom of that wood chip layer into the ultimately into groundwater. Has the smallest footprint, has very low power use. The big disadvantages: least performance stability due to unsaturated denitrification layer. And we do have some questions about the longevity of the wood chip layer, in particular with this design, because there are some concerns that there's more oxygen getting down to the denitrification layer, which we suspect could cause composting of the wood chips. And if you're composting the wood chips, you're not using them for nitrogen removal. So moving on to the next of the design paradigms. So I'm just going to call it the denitrifying layered media filter system. We like to call it the saturated layer cake or big layer cake here at the test center. The basic idea here is very similar to the simple design. So you have a septic tank, a pump chamber, low pressure distribution system, 2 layers. One is the 18-inch layer of Title V sand. The second layer is an 18-inch layer of the 50/50 wood chip and sand mix. But the difference here is that we wrap the bottom layer in an impervious liner. Why do we do that? So that we can maintain saturation in that bottom section. Saturation is really key to maintaining the anaerobic, so no oxygen or low oxygen conditions that the bacteria need to do the work of turning nitrate to nitrogen gas.
What do you encircle it with? The 18-inch 50/50 wood chips and sand. How do you encircle it? With what kind of material?
It's just an impervious PVC liner material, much like they would use over a landfill or other applications. It's a very commonly used material.
Okay.
It's a 30 to 40 mil material. We maintain the depth of liquid within this layer with the utilization of a standpipe. So this is the only way that the liquid can get out of this sort of large bathtub. And then it would flow from there into a final dispersal field or final disposal field, which would be an additional leach field off to the side for final disposal. In terms of performance, this is much more stable than what we saw with the unsaturated simple system. This is over, I think, what's this, about 1,700 days of operation, so multiple seasons. The red line is the influent coming from our distribution channel. So that's the source of all of our raw wastewater here. Typically that runs in the range of 40 to 50 milligrams per liter. And then the blue line there represents the final effluent coming out of the bottom of this wood chip system. And you can see typically we're below 10. There has been some creep up over the years, so we're kind of curious what's going on there. There are some blips that go higher. Those are typically seasonal issues. When you start to get into cold weather, the bacteria that do all the work for us start to slow down. They get kind of sluggish, much like the rest of us do when it gets cold. So they don't do as much denitrification as they might in a warm summer condition. So, you know, we see pretty good performance out of this system. We have a duplicate of this system here at the test center as well. This one is in conjunction, again, with the Stony Brook University folks. And we see very similar results with this, generally speaking. But again, with this system, they were interested in what they could do with the loading rates. And the first, couple of seasons, we saw pretty good performance. And then this is about where they decided to start overloading the system. And we saw the same results as we did with the unsaturated system, where we started to see breakout of wastewater to the surface. And additionally, the performance suffered pretty significantly. The advantages of this technology, so it's got good performance stability. It takes up a smaller footprint than the tank design that I'm going to talk about, because it's, well, you'll see when I get to that part. We have less concern about the wood chip longevity because we're maintaining saturation in the wood chip layer, which can slow down the potential for composting going on there. Again, very low power use because we have a single pump chamber. The pump itself is running probably 4 to 5 times a day for maybe a minute, minute and a half a day. So you're looking at, less than $50 a year easily for power use. The disadvantages, obviously a complex installation, utilizing a liner and putting in a second leach field, and it needs that final disposal field as well. And then I'm going to talk about the final design, and you'll notice there are a lot of similarities between this design and Pio Lombardo's Nitrex system. The primary difference here is the use of a single pass slow rate sand filter as opposed to a recirculating sand filter. So here again, septic tank goes into a pump chamber. We have a shallow pressure distribution system, and then that same 18-inch nitrification layer. But instead of it going into the wood chip layer, we intercepted at that point with that impervious liner again. That's that 30 mil impervious liner that we wrap around this section, so that we can contain and capture all the wastewater coming through here. That flows into the wood chip tank. So it goes to the bottom of the wood chip tank and then flows up, and then would go to final disposal. And here's the performance numbers that we see from this particular system. Again, this is the New York system in conjunction with Stony Brook University. So there were some, they tinkered with the loading rate on this particular system again. And we saw, in the beginning, certainly very good numbers, definitely on par with what Pio was seeing with his technology, which is very similar. We saw some blips during the winter time when you can, see some suffering in performance, and then it came back down. And then this is again where they started to tinker with the loading rates and doing a, 1.5 times loading and then double loading with the same obvious results. And we tried to tell them that double loading probably wasn't a good idea, but they wanted to do it anyway. So, and I had the advantage of listening to the other presentations as they were going on. And Brian Dudley specifically had a question for Pio about the dissolved oxygen coming through his recirculating sand filter section. And I just wanted to present a little bit of data on our single pass sand filter. So this is dissolved oxygen. It's basically a measure of the amount of oxygen that's in a liquid medium. And it's measured, this is in particular is measured in percentage. So 100% is total saturation of oxygen in that liquid media, and then 0 is 0% saturation. So there's coming out of that bed, there is quite a bit of oxygen, and that's what's doing all that nitrification work for us. So to follow on to that, these are the TKN and nitrate. So TKN is a measure of organic nitrogen and ammonia. That's the stuff that's coming out of our bodies and going into our wastewater stream. So the blue line there represents that fraction of the nitrogen, the TKN, and the red line, the red line is the TKN. The blue line is the nitrate coming from that single pass bed. So you can see almost all of that TKN has been converted to nitrate, significantly below 3 for the most part. Again, there are blips that are related to seasonal changes. These are winters where, this is the coldest part of winter where we see some suffering of the performance as well. But generally speaking, extremely stable nitrification performance through the single pass sand filter bed system. So you can get full nitrification without utilizing any type of aeration component and merely using a sand filter with a pump. So the advantages: best performance stability of the 3 designs. We have the least concern about wood chip longevity because you can easily pump the wood chips out of the tank and replace them. Whereas with the other designs, if we found the wood chips were running out, you would have to dig up the whole system and put in a new one. Again, very low power use. The disadvantages: it's a more complex installation. And when I say complex, I'm comparing against the other of the two designs, not against the full world of innovative systems. It needs that final disposal field again. So you're going to have 2 leach fields. So as a consequence, it has the largest footprint involved. So to sum all those up, I tried to think of a really great way to sum these up. So I came up with a simple star system. So 3 stars is, sort of the best in that particular category, and 1 star is the worst in that particular category. And this is really comparison against each other. I'm not comparing to Title V systems. I'm not comparing to nitro. I'm not comparing to Nitrex or any other technology out there. The 3-star system is strictly restricted to these 3 technologies because those are the only ones I'm talking about. So in terms of design simplicity, the simple layer cake wins in that category. Saturated layer cake is a bit more complex, but not as complex as the tank design. Installation simplicity, I would put the tank design as being a little bit easier to install than the saturated layer cake system, simply because you don't have that layering stuff. You don't have mixing wood chips with sand or any of the questions that might come with that, because those two are decoupled. Total system footprint, simple layer cake design, smallest footprint. Obviously, the tank design takes up the most room. In terms of installation costs, just because of those things, in terms of the amount of tankage needed, the amount of space needed, the simple layer cake system wins there. Tank system design loses there. Operation and maintenance, I put 3 stars on all these because it's really simple. It's a pump and a pump chamber and a pressure distribution leach field, which is like once per year operation and maintenance. Frankly, there's not a whole lot that really goes into maintaining that. Wood chip longevity, the tank design really wins in that category because it's in a tank and it's saturated. Saturated layer cake is kind of the middle of the road because it's saturated, but it's still underground, so there still could be some question. And then the simple layer cake system, of course, we have the issue with potential composting there. And then the category that really matters, I think, the most out of all the categories, which is the nitrogen performance, because this is where the rubber is really meeting the road in terms of meeting your TMDL compliance. So if you were to be using these systems, you really couldn't use the simple layer cake design, even though it is the simplest and the cheapest and it has the smallest footprint. In this particular case, the simplest system is not necessarily the best. The other 2 designs are definitely have a higher an advantage in overall nitrogen removal performance. And I put in the number of field installations of these that we have right now. So we've got 12 of these installed. Well, I think it's actually 11 right now in the field. Of the saturated layer cake design, to the best of my knowledge, there aren't any of those unless somebody else has done them. And the tank design, we have 1 in process. That's the one that Z mentioned earlier in the Schubel Pond project. So with that, that is my presentation, and happy to take questions. You're on mute, Hillary.
Sorry, I was trying to be respectful. It seems to me like we have a number of the simple layer cake installed in the ground, and it doesn't seem that's the direction we would want to go. The tank design seems interesting, but I would be a bit cautious installing that because we only have 1 in the ground. Are there any programs out there that might fund a portion of the installation of the tank design to get more data, or?
Yep. So that's partially what we're doing in the Schubel project. So we're going to put 1 of those in there. That's utilizing the same set of SNEP funds that we use for the other installations. We had some funding in a line item for that project that was supposed to go to a consultant that we didn't end up using. So we have a small pot of money that we're going to use to install probably, I would say, 2 to 3 of these out of that pot of money. Down in Long Island, the Suffolk County area, they're installing a lot of these. They're really going whole hog on installations with these. So we do have some field data. I didn't have it handy as I was putting together my presentation, and I didn't want to just make up a number.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, the performance is really sort of on par with what I showed tonight. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there's a lot of similarities between that design and what Pio has done. And his technology performs extremely well. So, of course, it's backed up by that. And this is the advantage of the non-proprietary technologies is it's something that anybody could pick up and do. You know, we don't own it. It's just out there in the world to use. You know, anybody could design it. Pio could design it, and he does. It's his nitrix technology, and of course, he had the idea first. So I want to fully credit Pio on that. And I also like to say, when I talk about that particular system, you know, Pio's been doing this for 20 plus years. He's been talking about these technologies for a long time and advocating for them and telling everybody that they work. And a lot of people had a lot of questions along the way. I like to say that Pio was right in what he was saying about his technology in terms of the performance. So yeah, there is other data. We're working on generating more data on these systems. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. It looks like John Kumbler has his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, it's the size that I was curious about, how much space the tank system needs. Given a lot of, I mean, quarter acre, half acre, 3/4 acre lots, which are the ones we're looking at basically. What kind of constraints would that be for the tank design? I mean, I'm having trouble picturing how much more space you'd need for the tank design. Obviously, a lot's not really a blank slate, but
right, yeah, because you do have, you know, you have essentially two leach fields involved. And Z, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what size the lot is for the system that we're looking at doing in the Schubel project, but I mean, we were able to fit it in that situation. I think they're what, half-acre lots down there, Z, if you're there? Maybe not. I don't know if you know, Scott. I know you.
I thought he said his lots were around 10,000 square feet. Very
Yeah,
small.
I think they vary between 1/4 and a half acre. But I'll just mention, you know, leach field size for a 3-bedroom house with good soils is around 600 square feet, John. So I think you'd add another 600 square feet plus whatever setbacks might be the additional area that would be required.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm just gonna look around here and see if we have any more questions for Brian. We're nearing the end of our time here. I wanted to circle back to Pio, who had one more quick comment he wanted to make just to clarify something. I don't see any raised hands on page 2.
Judy, I
all
think
right.
has a question, Hillary.
Looks like the Bernsteins have another question. Before we take Pio, go ahead, Judy. Judy, are you there? Go ahead.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay.
What would be the effect of heavy rains of, let's say, hurricane saturation, prolonged rains?
Brian, you want to answer that?
You know, that's obviously a concern. We haven't had the fortune of being ready with the sample bottles in the last few heavy rains that we've had. George Hoyfelder did some research a number of years ago that looked at the effect of heavier rains on pathogens, fecal coliform and the like. And we do see that when there are heavier rains, you see transport of some of those pathogens more quickly through the soil profile. But that's going to impact any soil-based technology that might be out there. So I imagine you would see, some whatever you're going to get in terms of maybe nitrate washed through the system is what you might suspect. You're going to probably get a lot of dilution going on there. So I imagine the net impact is probably minimal overall, but that's just a suspicion.
Right.
Thank you.
One more question, a quickie.
I'm just going to ask you to hold 1 second, please, because we have a couple other folks here that have not yet had a chance to speak or have their comments be heard. So if you could hold tight for 1 second. I have Mary Beth Chubb, who made a comment in the chat. She's from Mass DEP, and she wants us to know that the tank layer system is at the outset of approval in Massachusetts, and that's why there are a limited number of installations. So we should begin to see more installations over time of that technology. And Scott, can I ask you to hold, because I think you can give some closing comments. I want to be very mindful of the time. It's 5:23, and I'm going to circle back to Pio quickly to get his last clarification comment in. Go ahead, Pio.
While we're waiting for him, can I ask a quickie?
Well, hold 1 second, because I think
Okay.
he's talking and he's just trying to
Okay, there we
unmute. Go ahead, Pio.
Okay,
I was muted there. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. There's just two items that I wanted to clarify. In terms of our permit approvals, the Nitrex has DEP provisional use approval, which allows it to demonstrate performance and then seek approval for total nitrogen under 10. Nitrex has received a site-specific piloting permit to achieve total nitrogen under 10. So Nitrex, the point is that Nitrex does not have blanket to under 10 approval. It has it on a pilot on a site-specific basis only. Okay, so, and then the second one was relative, and Brian really did an excellent job on clarifying this. It was to just, it is not a passive system. It's a very low use, low energy use system. And the oxygen is provided by spraying water over the media. That's how the oxygen transfer occurs. And again, Brian spoke, extremely well on that scientific issue. So, and then the last piece was, I'd just like to, first thank you, Brian, for your gracious comments. It has been a long time. And I can be a pain.
Thank you, Pio. With that, we're going to jump back to Judy and Martin very quickly, please, because we have
very quick. Of the different trees, of the different chips that you use, are there certain tree chips that are more amenable to your situation? Does it matter what the chips are, what trees are? Are they oak? Are they teak? Are they, I don't know.
No, there's no difference. If you can hear me, there is no difference. Doesn't matter.
No difference. Okay.
Doesn't matter. No,
Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, I'll be really brief. I just want to summarize. I think it's convinced me that all three of these systems work. They remove nitrogen. They're pretty passive or completely passive. So I think we've got some really nice options to consider now. And the second point I wanted to make, I think there were several questions about seasonality, which is a really relevant question for Wellfleet as a unique, very summer community. And I think Brian Baumgartel's data is pretty convincing that these systems do perform a little bit better during the summer, warmer months. And I think that's a good thing for Wellfleet, because the nitrogen reduction numbers we have are on an average annual basis. And in fact, our systems are performing, your systems in Wellfleet are operating for the most part during the time period which they will get the higher performance. So I think that's a good thing. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Scott. Nancy Chavetta, go ahead.
Hi. I had a couple of questions for Pio. One is, you said that they can be completely gravity done if there's sufficient slope. Does that mean that there's not a pump used, or is there still a pump and electricity involved?
Yeah, there's no pump. And I'm glad you asked that question, because the tank design that Brian was referring to is basically, Brian, I would say, not Jay, the Oregon data, the first Nitrex system that was installed in the US was that design. It was a sand filter, a lined sand filter that went to a lined tank, if you will, where the Nitrex media was, and it flowed by gravity because there was enough gradient on the site for that to occur. So if you take a look at that sketch that Brian had, all you need to do is lift up the the wood chip piece and tilt the ground, and it works by gravity. So it is possible. For reference purposes, you're going to need about let's say round numbers, 4-foot drop from beginning to end for it to work. You might be able to do a little less, but that's a good number to start. So, but if you don't have, if it's a flat site, no, then it's too deep. You don't want it deep. That's why there's a pump to lift it up.
Okay.
And so,
When you talked about your operator visits once a year for sampling, that was different from the operation and maintenance sampling? Is that in addition to the operator
oh, that's the
visits?
same. Let me just repeat them just so what do you call it? The 13
20
20 per year covers everything.
for the first 3 years,
Well, that's per year.
Per
for the
year.
Right.
First 3 years.
each of the first 3 years.
The 660 then covers it for subsequent years.
Right, I got
Yeah.
that. I just was confused about the operator visits were once a year, but they're
Oh, yeah,
actually,
yeah, no, I was doing that for technical reasons to say the system only needs the operator to go once a
Okay.
year. But he's got to go the other times. Well, naturally, he's going to do both things when he's there once.
okay. And then when you talked about the cost of equipment, 18 to 22,000, is that for the entire new system or is it for retrofitting as well?
Well, it would be
Or is
pretty much the same, similar. I would use the lower range for existing. And it's really site specific because the real question there, the range is, do you need 2 pumps? We assume you need 1 pump.
Mhm.
Some sites could have a need for 2.
Okay,
And so that would, hope that answers your question.
yep. And then, oh, you didn't talk about engineering costs, but are engineering costs basically the same no matter what type of system you look into?
Well, let me say yes and no. I mean, we've done, and we know because we're engineers, and we do a lot of systems that are even not nitrics. So the engineering costs are really dictated by local requirements. Okay, and in our experience, the big items are going, and then, for instance, location. If you're in Conservation Commission jurisdictional areas, you got to deal with that. Then it's the permit requirements. What we found, frankly, is there a requirement for survey that doubles the cost, and we try to avoid survey requirements to the nth degree
Surveys.
because it doubles the cost.
Right.
Just the pure engineering of sizing and locating and building, et cetera. That's we've seen that's good. You can do that for $2,000, let's say. Okay. Now, if you got to go do a permit, et cetera, if you have to add survey, add $3,000. Now,
Okay, so I'm sorry to cut this off. I love the conversation. I love the Q&A, but we're reaching the end of our time here. And Mary Beth made a good point again. We sometimes talk about this as everyone knows what we know about these enhanced IA systems. And clearly there's a lot to learn. There's a lot for us to cover. And I'm sure we will have a repeat session sometime in the near future. But I just want to make it clear that all of these systems that we're talking about are in the process of demonstrating their ability to perform. So they're not yet general use. So there is some risk associated with the installation. There's the possibility that the technologies won't work, but what we're seeing based on the systems that are in the ground is that it appears to be working. So I think we present this information to you with great hope that these are some solutions for our future, but also understand that they still are in the process of demonstrating their ability to perform through the IA program, through Mass DEP. So the Board of Health is very cognizant of that, and they talk about that piece a lot when we talk about wastewater planning here in town. So just to come full circle, we do have money available through the town meeting that authorized us and will allow us to make a subsidy to homeowners that are interested in trying out one of these systems. We're eager to get some in the ground. We do not have a regulation requiring them at the moment. So this is all just first come, first serve. If you're interested, let us know and we can walk you through that process. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank our presenters. What an amazing job you've done. We've put a lot of information out there. If folks find they have questions tomorrow, within a week, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and we can forward your questions on to the right people. Thank you to our installers and engineers who joined us tonight and to the folks of Wellfleet. We're very appreciative.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank
Good
you.
night.